Hey guys, thanks for checking out my channel. Wanted to share with you guys a report that I found. Um, it's a 10K report. 10K report, for those of you who don't know, is like a financial statement that every company is required to make at the end of a year. And for last year, for 2023, it showed some interesting things in regards to compensation for some of our top leadership, including the Joy. And I wanted to share some of that with you guys today. But first, wanted to break up some of the components of their compensation. One of the biggest was performance pay. Now, if you guys don't know what performance pay is for private companies, this is like an arbitrary metric that they use to determine salaries. It's usually based on revenue or finances, but it can also be, direction of the company. In our case, it was down to the revenue, and our revenue was, if you guys have been following the price hikes you've been seeing for letters, first class mail, and everything else, you know that we've been increasing prices pretty much all year long and even last year. This has helped with some of that compensation pay, some of that bonus pay they've been seeing. The Joy claims that these price hikes he's been initiating were to help the post office, to make us more viable, to keep us around. But it's a bit hypocritical coming from him, because if you've seen some of the mail delays we've been experiencing, those were mainly attributed to him and how quickly he is shutting down facilities, crippling them from when he upgrades these buildings. And that's largely attributed to how he's kind of sloppily renovating these buildings in the middle of operations. Uh, as far as the report, let's get into it. So for last year, 2023, the Joy's compensation, his total compensation was $533,000, which which is an 8.72% increase from last year, which was 490,392. His base salary alone went up 3% during that time. It's roughly double what we got from our contracts over the years. If you look at Doug, Doug is the guy who negotiates our contracts for all the unions. He's the HR manager basically. He has this negotiating team that handles the contracts for the post office. Doug over here, he's seen a 42% increase in his salary, his total compensation over the last 3 years. He's at right now about $847,000 a year for the year last year. Now I don't know about you, but these contracts he's been negotiating, I don't get the sense that this is a shared sacrifice for any of them. It's clear from like what other companies are doing, private companies, since the post office wants to model themselves and pretend they're a private company. If you look at Virgin Airlines, Nintendo, a bunch of other private companies, they shared the burden when their companies were in serious constraints, serious problems that they had. The Nintendo CEO Iwata, he cut his salary in half in order to avoid layoffs. Richard Branson, he donated $250 million out of his own pocket to help prevent employees, to help employees that were suffering from the pandemic and to avoid job loss. You compare that to our leadership, they're not taking a pay cut. If anything, they're increasing their pay with all the increase in revenue from raising stamps and the like. So they're not really sharing in our struggles. We have employees like carriers especially, they're doing a job that's getting harder every day.
No disrespect to anybody, no disrespect, but we have carriers starting at fast food wages.
Hmm.
This is a federal employment job, a federal government job. When I first started, and you told people were employed with the postal service, man, you're rich. You have it made. But we have carriers living in their cars, union halls having to put in showers so that they can take showers because they're having to live out of their cars. Our wages are fast food when you start out, completely unacceptable. And we got carriers that are hurting. And It's a nonchalant attitude by our leadership right now that has pissed a lot of people off, man. And they're militant right now and extremely angry. But and I don't blame them. We have terrible working conditions at the Postal Service, absolutely horrible.
with um, dog attacks, robberies, and they're surviving off food stamps. Some of them in places like California, people are working 2 jobs, and this sacrifice that the Joy keeps talking about, this dire straits that we're in, he's not really sharing in that with us, and neither are any of the executives for the company. And this is, keep in mind, this is not a private company. This is part of the government, even though they like to uh, highlight that they're independent. They're still very much part of the government. Otherwise, we wouldn't have senators getting in our business about how the mail is getting slower.
Today's message is maximum pressure. Maximum pressure. I will continue to apply maximum pressure to hold the Postmaster General accountable for his obligation to my constituents.
They wouldn't have that oversight hearing that happened earlier this year. None of that would happen if we were completely independent. So that's kind of a false equivalency and an excuse to, have their way with us in terms of how they compensate us and how they treat us. Let's look at the total budget for the government just last year. It was about $6 trillion. $4 trillion of that is mandated, but the rest is, discretionary. So you look at that $6 trillion that the government spends already. We cost less than 1% of the total budget. I think it's like $80 billion in operating costs, but we fund all of that because we, through our sales, cover most of that. The only time the government ever covers anything is when we lose money for a quarter, but even that is very small. This is like fractions of a percent, basically. So this is very trivial in terms of monetary loss for the government, and it goes to show how little they care about us when they're griping about percentages, fractions of percentages that they're losing. Meanwhile, we have carriers that are, some of them are dying due to heat-related conditions. They're getting attacked by customers on the way to routes. We have a lot of constraints that the private sector has, but we don't have the same level of bargaining power that they do because they can strike and they can make more noise about it in the public media. But we don't have that same leverage. So I think it's up to us to make that case. We can make that case with our unions. I know that the CLC, the Concerned Letter Carriers, is a movement started by the vice president of the letter carriers. I think his name is Henry. And I'm going to link that below in the video, but that's a way you guys can get involved to help change some of this culture that we have in terms of taking care of our employees, making sure that we're compensated fairly. And I'll pass it off to you guys, and I'll close this video with that. Thanks for checking my video, and peace.